Victorian-era London was a place of unimaginable hardship and suffering for the lower classes. It was here that the infamous Jack the Ripper committed massacres that would both horrify and fascinate the minds of British citizens. A young, emaciated woman undresses and sits down in a small metal bathtub. She looks distressed and traumatized by something. Trying to drown whatever haunts her, she drinks glass after glass until no drop is left in the bottle. She lets the bottle go in resignation, letting it fall to the floor and shatter. Unable to bear her suffering any longer, she picks up a large shard of glass and slashes her wrists. A figure clad in a black coat and leather gloves pours a cloudy, sickly brown liquid into a glass and drinks it. He pulls open a drawer. Half of it is full of letters and pictures of women. The other half, covered by a blood-stained piece of cloth, hides a knife and a gun. Breathing heavily in anticipation for what's to come, he pulls out the knife, feels its edge, and sets out. The man's silhouette covers the screen and cloaks it in darkness, like Jack the Ripper did to Whitechapel for 3 years. As the sun rises over London, church bells ring, calling the faithful to worship. Not among them is Sebastian, a middle-aged reporter who has fallen asleep fully clothed and with a cigarette in his mouth. A woman walks into the room and wakes him, chastising him for smoking in bed. She tells him the risk of the building being burnt down by falling asleep with a lit cigarette. He retorts that the building being destroyed would be no great loss, considering such a fire would consume both him and the woman he's speaking to, Iris. His outlook on life is apathetic. While he claims he can't afford a place of his own due to money issues, Iris accuses him of being a penny pincher. Being a reporter, he profited nicely off of stories about Jack the Ripper, however. Instead of taking Iris somewhere nice and marrying her as he promised, Sebastian says the money was spent on having a sink installed for her. As for the marriage, even God himself could not make an honest woman out of her. This characterizes both Sebastian and the Victorian era. While he may not be outright malicious, he is at least manipulative. As for the period when a functioning sink to have access to drinking water costs as much as a marriage and a honeymoon, it's easy to understand how people like Sebastian can fall into apathy. No matter what they do, life will never get better. The couple bickers some more. With Sebastian's wages not being enough to cover rent, Iris has to resort to selling her body, but it seems like she has not entirely given up hope. She's seen saving some of her earnings in a little box. Sebastian reminisces about having better stories to write, like the Ripper's butchery, and making a decent income. The only thing left to write about now is poverty and suffering, which people don't need to read about in a newspaper, as they already live in those situations. With both of them looking dejected, Iris tries to liven up the mood, but Sebastian dispassionately refuses her attempt at intimacy and rushes off to work. She looked upset, but apparently this was not unexpected for her. She pulls out considerably more money than what she allowed Sebastian to see, hidden from under her skirt. He would have seen it if they had got naked. Before he leaves the building, in the stairwell, Sebastian picks up an old print of his newspaper, looking fondly at the story they published about one of the Ripper's assassinations. His reaction may seem strange, but it is part of the unfortunate reality that reporters live in. While their work is important for informing the public of ongoing events, they benefit when tragedies occur that capture people's attention and suffer when nothing of note is happening. He's interrupted by Lisa's landlady, who informs him that rent is due. Having just borrowed a penny from Lisa to buy matches, Sebastian is in no position to pay, but he assures the landlady he will pay up before the end of the day and leaves. He arrives at work late, being met by his boss, Mr. Stimson, and by a younger colleague, Mr. Lenny Cartwright. He gets ridiculed by the former and outperformed by the latter. It's truly a rough time to be a reporter, as the most interesting story Sebastian gets to write about is a missing dog, while his colleague is writing his first story on a robbery he saw on the way to work. He is likely to get the front page with it. He argues with his boss, claiming it was his work on the Ripper exterminations that made the paper famous, but he's quickly shot down. A year has passed since the slaughters, and Sebastian has failed to deliver anything of value in that time. Lenny tries to cheer him up, reminding Sebastian of what he said to him once: a good reporter can turn heroes into villains, and villains into heroes. Sebastian demonstrates the validity of this saying with the robbery story that Lenny is writing about. While briefcases full of cash were being brought into a bank, a man simply walked up, snatched one of the cases, and ran. The guards fired at him, but the crowd panicked, and in the confusion, the thief got away. Lenny sees the robber as the villain of the story because he committed a crime. Meanwhile, Sebastian proposes that telling the story this way will not get people's attention. While suffering from poverty, no one will feel any empathy for a rich banker who lost some of his money. But if the robber is painted as a down-on-his-luck man with a sick wife who had to resort to crime to support his family, that is something that people could get behind. Sebastian quickly even fabricates a source to support this portrayal, using Lenny as a first-hand witness to the act. Again, it is shown that while he may not be acting out of malice, Sebastian can be quite dishonest, even in his work. The story, if told this way, would certainly get more attention, but is it right for a reporter to bend the truth to this degree? To even outright lie to the public? Is Sebastian a good reporter by crafting a story people would read? Or is he failing in his duty to report the truth? All of this by creating empathy for someone who did commit a crime and endangered people, perhaps even encouraging others to do the same. Lenny objects that he cannot be a source if he's writing the story, but Sebastian's goal appears to have been to steal the story from under his nose and start to write it himself. With the action of embellishing every detail, he discourages Lenny from pursuing writing articles in the first place. Strangely enough, he does resist the accusation that he makes things up when writing a story. But in fact, he did try to lie about every single aspect of the story possible. Sebastian gets up to light a cigarette. While rummaging through his bag for matches, he finds a strange letter with his name on it that wasn't there before. The letter is written in red ink. It's something he has encountered before, as Sebastian looks mortified like he's seen a ghost. It's a sign that the Ripper has returned, and indeed, as he opens the letter, somewhere in the city a carpenter finds a young woman whose throat has been slashed in his workshop. Sebastian is skeptical of the letter's authenticity, revealing that when the original massacres happened, he was the one who made up the letters the Ripper supposedly wrote to the paper. This letter is written just like that. Lenny, again, presses him regarding making up things and being dishonest with their readers, but Sebastian believes that a technicality exonerates him. He never claimed the letters were from the Menace, only they were signed Jack the Ripper, so he did not lie. He simply found an angle to tell the story. Will he be punished for his loose interpretation of truth, or will it help him resurrect his career? Whatever happens, two things are certain. One is that a butchery in the Ripper's style has been committed, and two, whoever did it wants Sebastian to know about it. He puts on a brave face in front of Lenny, claiming the letter is nothing more than a prank and that he has no plans of following up on it. As an excuse to leave the office, he tells Lenny that he is going to get some matches. He makes his way to Mulberry Street, where the letter says the butchery took place. When he gets there, he does find the workshop mentioned in the letter, as well as the woman's body. Right away, he pulls out a small notebook and starts making a crude drawing of the crime scene, but is interrupted by a constable, who upon seeing Sebastian at the crime scene, arrests and throws him into a cell as a suspect. He will need to wait until Chief Inspector Wingate arrives to interrogate him, as the man who arrested him is not willing to listen or check on his alibi. While he waits for the inspector, Lenny, back at the office, moves over to a typewriter and starts working on a story. When Inspector Wingate does arrive, he begins interrogating Sebastian. He produces the Slaughter's letter as a reason for his being at the crime scene. It turns out this is not the first time Sebastian has ended up in custody, with a letter from Jack the Ripper in hand, as he was arrested last year too. The police found out back then that the letters were fake. The information was not made public, as it would certainly have resulted in Sebastian losing his job and the paper going bankrupt. It is now causing Inspector Wingate to become all the more suspicious. It also doesn't help his case that an ink pen and a bottle of red ink are found in his bag. While all of this has hurt his credibility in the eyes of Wingate, there is no evidence that he's guilty of the actual massacres, so he's released from the cell, but the inspector still has some questions for him. They sit down to discuss the Mulberry Street attack and its connection with the Ripper's case from last year. Sebastian is mentioned in the case file multiple times, as the inspector working the case, Reese, tried to pin the Slaughters on him because of the fake letters. In the end, the inspector had to be let go into early retirement for his failure to deliver results for the Ripper case. It's difficult to say for certain whether or not Reese could have delivered any results, given the limited resources and technology police had at the time. However, having to spend time interrogating and checking up on a reporter with fake letters certainly would not have helped. While Sebastian has so far dodged the consequences of his lies, the people he's interacted with have not been so lucky. Inspector Wingate thinks this was the work of a copycat. The Ripper's acts were well known to the public, so someone trying to make a name for himself could easily copy his style to gain notoriety. Sebastian agrees the slayer may not be the original Jack, but his motivation is puzzling. As the letter is signed as Jack the Ripper, all publicity from this case will be attributed to the original, not to the copycat. There is also the terrifying possibility that the actual Jack the Ripper has made a comeback. Wingate inspects the letters closely, comparing the handwriting on the old fake letters and the new ones. They are nearly identical, given that Sebastian did not write the new one and the old letters were in a sealed case. The only way the Menace could have possibly copied the style of the fakes is if they had access to police records. The inspector looks visibly shaken by the thought, but cannot come up with any alternative explanation. Sebastian arrives back at Iris's home. He tells her about the letter, getting arrested, and the possibility of the Ripper's return. Even if the persona of Jack the Ripper was entirely made up by Sebastian, someone did butcher all of those girls a year ago, and someone is out there doing it again. Concerned for her safety, Sebastian asks Iris not to go out tonight, but with their financial constraints and not knowing when it will be safe to go out again, they simply can't afford it. Iris tries to reassure him by showing him a small folding knife that she carries for protection, but it does little to calm him down. The last time might have been a boon for them. letting Sebastian make up stories that sold the papers. But recalling it fondly just this morning with a genuine letter and the assassin's eyes on him, he's taking the situation much more seriously now. A figure clad in a black coat and leather gloves pours himself a glass of a familiar sickly brown liquid. Once more, he opens the drawer filled with women's pictures. Breathing heavily, he retrieves the knife and sets out. The Ripper will strike again. And this time, Iris was on one of the pictures in his drawer. The shadow of the menace consumes the screen. Iris will survive for tonight, as a different working girl is shown taking the masked man to a basement and becoming the Ripper's next victim. Sebastian lays in bed and tries to fall asleep, but memories of the deceased woman keep coming back to him. Unable to sleep and concerned for Iris's safety, he goes out to find her, however not knowing exactly which street she's working on. He has to walk up and down the city to find her. After walking around for a while, he does run into a woman. She offers her services to Sebastian. He refuses and tries to ask her questions, but the woman tells him that she's short on time. Having no idea where to find his girlfriend, Sebastian tries to pay for answers, but the woman snatches the coins out of his hand. While struggling over the money, the same constable who arrested him this morning runs into them. He runs off to avoid getting arrested a second time today, but the constable sees his face, and he looks to be highly suspicious of Sebastian. The morning comes once again, and Sebastian's morning routine begins. Iris wakes him up. They bicker. He gets interrupted while leaving by the landlady for rent. He promises to pay up, heads to work, and while looking in his bag for matches, he finds a note from Jack the Ripper. Mr. Stimpson is upset at him again. A rival paper got an exclusive story on the assassination on Mulberry Street. While their front page was on a lost hunting dog, Sebastian is certain their rival newspaper is bringing a policeman, as exclusive information on recent events seems to reach them faster than anyone. But his boss is not satisfied by this explanation. He warns him that if he does not deliver results, he will be replaced by Lenny. After Stimpson leaves, Sebastian shares the sketch he made of the crime scene with Lenny. Lenny is excited by this news. They would be the first paper to have a picture for the story, but Sebastian doesn't share his enthusiasm. He's been waiting for a story like this for a year, but this time the actual Slayer has his eyes set on him. He finally understands that the threat is real, and that this Slayer's actions are not just a story to find an angle, to gain some publicity. He also feels partially responsible. If the Terminator is trying to get publicity, and Sebastian writes about him, that gives him an incentive to assassinate again. He reveals the Ripper's second letter, an invitation to Adelina Grove to see his next victim. Sebastian decides to go and take Lenny with him. They arrive at the crime scene to find a woman's body. This time, the Ripper was not satisfied with a simple slashed throat. The woman's breast has been cut open, large parts of the skin peeled to the side, and part of her flesh cut out. Lenny starts to sketch the body for the paper, and questions Sebastian's assumption that the hunter must have been a man. Last year, the police questioned dozens of men, but not a single woman. Perhaps that's why they never found the culprit. Sebastian thinks that no woman can do what they are looking at. Lenny disagrees. Anyone with a knife could do this. The assassinated women were both prostitutes, whose bodies had been moved after being finished off. This would make the likelihood of the Ripper being a woman fairly low, as most average people would struggle to move the weight of a deceased body undetected. Was Lenny simply pondering the question without considering the details of the case, or did he have an ulterior motive? Back at home, Sebastian is concerned about Iris going out to work again. Iris tells him that if he does not want her to go out, he needs to bring more money in. She sees the letters from the Ripper as a gift from God. Like the previous year, he could write article after article, selling papers and profiting off the news. However, Sebastian's perspective on the matter has changed. Now that the danger feels much more personal, rather than a vague idea that the threat is out there, it terrifies him. He does catch on to one detail though. He only told Iris about one letter, but she knows there is more than one. She gives a hasty explanation and rushes out, leaving him looking puzzled and suspicious. A man in black, a drink of cloudy brown liquid, heavy breathing, and a knife. The Ripper will claim another victim tonight. The morning comes, but this time Sebastian will not be woken up by Iris again. He looks like he spent the entire night thinking about everything that's happened. Hearing Iris's footsteps, he quickly lies down and pretends to be asleep. She enters quietly, sneaks up to the bed, pulls out a new letter hidden under her dress, and tries to hide it in his bag. Sebastian catches her red-handed. He demands answers from her. The Ripper has been paying her to plant the letters in his bag. She's never seen his face, but feels she's safe from the Ripper because he needs her to reach Sebastian. She does not understand the real possibility that they both may become his victims, or that her body may be used to send the next message. Back at the paper, Sebastian is quickly writing up the story about the latest extermination. He shows Lenny the latest letter he has received. Lenny questions why he is writing the story now, as he was reluctant to do it before. Sebastian, not wanting to admit he's afraid of what the Ripper could do to Iris if he does not write, tells Lenny the story of how he got into being a reporter. He shows him a half-naked picture of a young woman. It's the same woman from the beginning of the movie. It turns out she was from a wealthy family. She did a photo shoot under the impression that it was for artistic value, but the pictures got shared around the town instead. Sebastian got a hold of one. And in his own words, nothing sells newspapers better than a sex scandal. It was not the hardships of Victorian-era London, nor the actions, nor fear of a deranged slaughterer that drove her to take her own life, but because of shame and humiliation for which Sebastian is directly responsible. Lenny questions what this has to do with the Ripper attacks. Sebastian answers that printing papers give them a lot of power. He plans to use that power against the menace. The Ripper wants to be front-page news, to terrify the town, and to scare people into not leaving their homes. Sebastian is determined not to give him that. He understands the power of controlling what is in the news, but not the responsibility that comes with the power. His work has already brought misery and expiry to at least one person. Now he plans to antagonize an assassinator, without any plan to capture him or cooperate with the police. Who knows what the Ripper's reaction will be to such a provocation? There is no guarantee he will not simply pick up his knife and go on a spree of massacres. Before Sebastian can go through with this plan, Mr. Stimson informs him that a visitor is waiting for him. It's Inspector Wingate, here to arrest him. Sebastian is formally charged with the extermination. It turns out the Ripper's latest victim was Maggie, the same woman he had an interaction with 2 nights ago while looking for Iris. From the perspective of the constable who spotted him, it looked like Sebastian was attacking the woman, and the next night she was found assassinated in an alley. He was spotted at every other crime scene, and he has admitted to writing the Terminator's letters. Short of being caught red-handed, there could hardly be more evidence that he is guilty. He's thrown into a cell, and Wingate advises him to confess in the hopes of getting a life sentence in an insane asylum instead of being hanged. Sebastian tries to argue for his innocence, saying that the menace is trying to set him up, but has no explanation for why he would do that. With no other options left, he asks Wingate to talk with Iris, as she's the only one who can vouch for his innocence. A man clad in black walks up the stairs. He enters Iris's home, sneaks up on her, and kidnaps her. Jack the Ripper was Chief Inspector Wingate all along. He drags Iris in front of Sebastian and holds a knife to her throat. The woman whose life Sebastian ruined by publicizing her pictures and turning the story into a sex scandal was Wingate's only daughter. At first, he tried to take him down using his power as the chief inspector, but in the eyes of the law, no crime had been committed. So instead, Wingate decided to give Sebastian a taste of his own medicine by coming up with a good story to ruin his life. Now he has Sebastian exactly where he wants him, locked in his police station, with the only person who could prove his innocence held at knife point. The consequences of his actions have finally caught up to him. While Wingate elaborates on his year-long revenge plot, the narrative intended for the public regarding Sebastian is revealed. Concurrently, someone is shown retrieving a gun and keys from the same drawer where the Ripper had concealed his knife. In a desperate bid to save Iris's life, Sebastian offers to confess to the homicides. If he confesses, there will be no need for a trial, no witnesses will be called, and there will be no need for Iris to lose her life. Wingate gives a thought to his proposal but refuses. He's confident Sebastian will hang, whether he confesses or not, and one more attack will only make the case against him stronger. He raises the knife, and right as he's about to cut Iris down, Sebastian charges him from the front, while Lenny shoots him in the back of the head. Lenny was the mystery figure who took the keys and the gun from the Ripper's drawer. The two men sit down in Wingate's study to discuss what happened. Lenny tells Sebastian that Inspector Wingate is his stepfather and how he changed after what happened to his daughter. He put on a brave face, but Lenny could tell that something inside him broke, and he became entirely consumed by revenge. He confesses that he agreed to help his father get revenge on Sebastian, but claims he didn't know that Wingate would go through with the slaughters. He assumed that his father would just pin existing cases on Sebastian. He went along with it, even if he thought it was wrong. But now, the next morning, the entire city will find out what happened. Sebastian will have the front page for a month, and the Wingate family name will be dragged through the mud again. The family has barely recovered from the first scandal, and this would be much worse. Lenny cannot allow that to happen, and he points the gun at Sebastian. To save his skin, Sebastian proposes they work together. The story is too big. It has to come out some way. But if they can find the right angle to tell it, they can save the family's name and reputation. They have the power to turn villains into heroes, and Sebastian has again failed to learn the lesson that using this power for selfish means has consequences. The next day at the paper, Sebastian types up the article for the paper, but before handing it in, he gives it to Lenny for proofreading. Chief Inspector Wingate, heroic to the end, will be the headline. Last night's events are told in a manner that makes the inspector out as a hero who passed away confronting the slayer and preventing another massacre. Without any lies but purposely misleading and vague wording, a slayer will be remembered by the public as a hero. Lenny approves of the article and apologizes to Sebastian for pressuring him into doing this. Sebastian accepts the apology and leaves to hand the article in, while Lenny's gaze lingers on him. The woman whose life he ruined was not only Wingate's daughter, she was also Lenny's stepsister, a fact that Sebastian does not seem to have considered in the slightest. At the end of the day, he heads home with a bouquet in hand. He finally pays the landlady his due rent and goes up to surprise Iris with a gift. She's happy that he's brought her a gift, received a bonus, and helped out Lenny. Reading out the headline of his article, she starts kissing Sebastian, trying to distract him with intimacy. He does catch on to the fact that Iris is not supposed to know how to read, but she just read the headline of the paper. If she knew how to read and lied about it, she knew what was in the letters. She knew Wingate was setting him up and went along with it. The realization comes too late, as knocking on the door is Lenny, with a gun in one hand and £1,000 in the other that he collected from his father's life insurance policy. This was only possible because of Sebastian's article, claiming the inspector got martyred in the line of duty. It was Lenny that Iris would go to at night, who taught her how to read, who took the pictures of his stepsister, and who talked his stepfather into committing the butchers. All was done according to his plan, and now all that is left for him to do is pull the trigger. He says he's hesitant to do it, considering all that Sebastian has done for him, but Iris has no such reservations. She hates Sebastian for not marrying her, providing for her, assuming she would stick around forever and not find someone better, and failing her in just about every way. She's ready to cut his throat as she reveals that she was the one who committed some of the assassinations, but Lenny stops her. The Ripper only targeted women, and the slaughter of Sebastian might attract a full investigation, but if it looked like he took his own, no one would bother looking any further. This time, without any hesitation, Lenny pulls the trigger, and Sebastian gets slaughtered instantly, with a hole in his head. Lenny quickly plants the gun in his hand and prepares to leave. Iris proposes going uptown together with the briefcase full of money, but Lenny, having no further use for her, declares their partnership over. He did learn from Sebastian how to deceive without telling a lie. Iris believed they would go together and she'd get a share of the money, without any such promise being made. Iris, infuriated, demands the money and threatens him with a knife. After Lenny refuses, she lunges at him and stabs him in the chest, only to find that in the bag instead of £1,000 is a single check, payable only to Lenny and completely useless to her. She lunges at him with the knife again, but Lenny pulls the gun from Sebastian's hand and shoots her as well. He gets up, takes the check back, plants the gun in Sebastian's hand again, and leaves.